The P-47 Thunderbolt, known as JUG, was one of the most imposing and feared aircraft of World War II. Its history is marked by impressive aerial achievements and its ability to withstand damage that other fighters could not endure. Created to meet the needs of the United States Air Force, the Thunderbolt excelled in both air combat and ground attack missions. But what makes this aircraft so special? And why did it cause such shock among Japanese fighter pilots who until then dominated the skies of the Pacific? Let's understand how the P-47, with its robust characteristics and innovative design, became a true nightmare for Japanese aviators, who were accustomed to fighting against more agile and less resilient aircraft. The shock experienced by Japanese pilots when facing the Thunderbolt was not only physical, but also psychological, as the P-47 brought with it a new way of waging aerial warfare. To understand the impact of this fighter jet, we need to go back in time a little to the era in which it was developed and its first encounters in the skies of the Pacific. The Thunderbolt was conceived in the early 1940s, during the urgent need of the Allied forces to have a combat aircraft capable of fighting Luftwaffe planes, and, at the same time, operating effectively in the Pacific theater of operations, where the war demanded aircraft with long range, robustness, and impressive firepower. The P-47 Thunderbolt was one of the most effective answers to this need. It was powered by a Pratt & Whitney R2800 radial engine, which gave it extraordinary power, allowing it to carry an impressive amount of armament and withstand damage that would have been fatal to other aircraft of the time. The P-47's fuselage was made of steel, which provided extra strength, making it more robust in combat. Furthermore, the P-47 was one of the fastest aircraft of its time. Its range was also remarkable, allowing it to perform long-range missions without losing much performance. This made it a real threat not only to German aviators, but especially to Japanese pilots, who were accustomed to facing more agile but less robust aircraft. When the first encounters between the P-47 and Japanese fighters occurred, the surprise was immediate. The Japanese pilots, who expected a more agile fight, soon realized that the Thunderbolt was not like the other aircraft they had faced. Their combat tactics, which revolved around speed and agility, did not work so well against an opponent that, even if not the most agile, had superior firepower and resilience. Next, we will see how these characteristics manifested themselves on the battlefield. The psychological impact on the Japanese pilots, and the shock they felt upon realizing they were facing something they could not easily defeat. When we talk about the P-47 Thunderbolt, one of its most striking characteristics is its impressive resilience. For Japanese fighter pilots, who were accustomed to lighter and more agile aircraft, encountering such a robust plane was completely unexpected and, in a way, terrifying. The P-47, with its construction designed to withstand heavy damage, represented a threat that Japanese pilots were not prepared to face. One of the most surprising features of the Thunderbolt was its steel fuselage. Unlike many other aircraft of the time, which were made of lighter aluminum alloys, the P-47 was designed with a robust structure that could withstand impacts from machine guns and even cannon fire. This meant that in a combat situation, a P-47 pilot could be hit multiple times and still continue to fly and fight, something that greatly surprised Japanese pilots, who were not accustomed to this durability. In terms of endurance capabilities, the P-47 had a unique ability to absorb impacts. Historical accounts show that the Thunderbolt, in many cases, returned from missions with considerable holes in its fuselage, but still managed to return to base and continue operating. While aircraft like the Mitsubishi A6M0, which were extremely agile, could be shot down with a single gunshot, the P-47 could be hit in multiple points and often still complete its mission. This durability of the Thunderbolt was a shock to Japanese pilots, who were accustomed to more vulnerable fighters. Another impressive feature of the P-47 was its powerful radial engine, the Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine, with its enormous power, allowed the P-47 not only to fly fast, but also to be very efficient in long-range combat. Japanese pilots were accustomed to the performance of fighters like the Zero, which, although agile, did not possess the same resilience. In combat, while the P-47 could withstand multiple hits and remain operational, the Zero and other Japanese fighters did not have this same resilience. This resulted in a situation of great surprise for enemy pilots, who saw the P-47 as an almost indestructible force in the skies. Regarding direct combat, the P-47 not only withstood the attack, but also counterattacked forcefully. Its armament was another point that put the Japanese pilots at a disadvantage. The Thunderbolt was armed with 850 caliber machine guns. This represented massive firepower compared to Japanese fighters. These machine guns could destroy virtually any aircraft that came into close range, making Japanese pilots extremely cautious when approaching the P-47 in combat. The ability to inflict damage at long range, coupled with the aircraft's resilience, made the Thunderbolt a formidable fighting machine that the Japanese did not know how to effectively counter. All of this, combined with the combat tactics, the P-47's capabilities presented Japanese pilots with a dilemma. They were accustomed to attacking with speed and agility, but the P-47 not only withstood attacks, but also retaliated with impressive force. With each encounter in the skies, the surprise grew. How was it possible that such a large and relatively slower fighter was so difficult to shoot down? The answer lay in the aircraft's physical resilience, its ability to continue fighting even when severely damaged. When Japanese pilots realized that American fighters couldn't be easily shot down, they began to understand that they were dealing with something far beyond what they were prepared to face. The P-47 was not only difficult to destroy, but also possessed firepower that could eliminate any fighter in an instant. When Japanese pilots faced the P-47 Thunderbolt, they were not only dealing with a robust and resilient aircraft, but also with a completely different combat strategy of those they were accustomed to facing. The P-47 was not an agile fighter like the Mitsubishi A6M0, but its combat tactics, combined with its resilience, made it a far more dangerous adversary than the Japanese pilots could have imagined. The P-47 combat style. One of the great advantages of the P-47 was its versatility in combat, unlike Japanese fighters, which were known for their agility and quick maneuvers. The P-47 adopted a more direct and aggressive combat approach. American pilots, especially those of the 8th Air Army, learned to use the P-47's characteristics to their advantage. The Thunderbolt was ideal for straight-line combat at high speed, where its endurance and firepower stood out. In combat, P-47 pilots often used tactics that focused on direct and constant attack. They pursued enemy aircraft with their superior range and speed, firing their heavy 50 caliber machine guns, which could hit Japanese fighters at a great distance. While Japanese pilots were accustomed to attacking and maneuvering quickly to evade, the P-47 advanced without hesitation, constantly pressing the enemy. This aggressive behavior, combined with its resilience, confused the Japanese pilots, who were used to a more evasive fighting style. Psychological shock of Japanese pilots. For Japanese pilots, the encounter with the P-47 was an extremely disturbing psychological experience. Many Japanese aircraft, such as the Zero, were designed for maximize agility and acrobatic maneuverability, allowing its pilots to move quickly through the skies, performing agile attacks and escapes. However, the P-47, being a larger and heavier aircraft, did not have the same agility. This led Japanese pilots to initially underestimate the aircraft. The surprise came when the P-47 pilots, they began to adopt a combat tactic that negated the maneuverability advantages of Japanese aircraft. Instead of trying to maneuver frantically like the Japanese fighters, The American pilots followed a direct, no-retreat combat line, utilizing the P-47's durability to continue the fight. They were willing to absorb damage and keep moving forward, something the Japanese pilots were unaccustomed to facing. The psychological shock stemmed from the Japanese pilots' inability to circumvent or overcome this tactic, which quickly became a source of frustration. The perception of unbeatability. The P-47's resilience was one of the biggest factors of confusion. Many Japanese pilots began to wonder if it would be possible to destroy those planes. The P-47 continued to fly and attack, even after being hit several times, which created a feeling of helplessness among the enemy pilots. Furthermore, the heavy firearm and the Thunderbolt's destructive power was impressive, making any attempt to get close extremely dangerous. This psychological factor, the perception that the enemy could not be easily destroyed, also had a significant effect on the Japanese pilots, who were trained to hunt with speed and precision, but not to deal with an aircraft that withstood damage so effectively. For many of them, the simple act of to engage in combat with a P-47, it was a nerve-wracking game, where the risks of losing were extremely high and the chances of winning were slim. Reports from Japanese pilots, accounts from Japanese pilots of the time indicate how much the psychological shock was profound when facing the P-47s. A pilot of Mitsubishi A6M0, he commented that after an encounter with a Thunderbolt, he felt that the Americans had an unbeatable aircraft, which generated a feeling of despair and frustration. The lack of effective tactics to neutralize the P-47 led some pilots to question their abilities and the effectiveness of Japanese aircraft. This fear and psychological discomfort were reinforced by P-47's almost supernatural resilience when a Japanese pilot was in combat against other Allied aircraft, such as the Spitfire or the Mustang. There was always the hope that a daring maneuver or a successful attack could bring down the enemy. However, with the P-47, that hope was practically non-existent. The machine's ruggedness and firepower made it a relentless enemy, capable of thwarting all attempts at victory. The P-47 Thunderbolt's design not only reflected its mission as a robust and resilient fighter, but also incorporated mechanical features that made it one of the most lethal and effective aircraft of World War II. The P-47 was designed to withstand extreme combat conditions, and its technical characteristics were fundamental in generating the psychological impact that so baffled Japanese pilots. Robust fuselage and aerodynamic design. Fuselage of the P-47 was one of the most remarkable aspects of its construction. Made of robust steel, the Thunderbolt structure was designed to be impact-resistant, allowing the aircraft to survive damage that would have been fatal to other fighters of the time. Unlike other World War II combat aircraft, which used aluminum or lighter alloys, the use of steel in the P-47 was a choice that prioritized durability. Furthermore, the aerodynamic shape of the fuselage not only allowed for greater drag, but also improved the stability and its performance at high speeds. This translated into greater efficiency in combat, where speed and endurance were crucial factors. For Japanese pilots who were accustomed to more agile aircraft, the P-47 stood out because ability to fly in a straight line with great stability, which made him difficult to knock down during fights. The powerful Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine, the motor. Radial Pratt & Whitney R2800 double waspet was one of the main strengths of the P-47. This engine was immensely powerful, with 2,000 horsepower, and provided impressive acceleration, allowing the Thunderbolt to reach speeds of up to 700 km/h in combat. This power not only ensured a high cruising speed and a good rate of climb, but also offered a crucial advantage over many enemy fighters, including the Japanese. The ability to continue flying after engine damage was another vital characteristic of the P-47. Even after being hit in vital areas, The engine often continued to function, something that was surprising to enemy pilots. The radial engine, with its robust construction and reliable mechanical parts, became one of the P-47's greatest assets, allowing it to continue combat even when other aircraft were out of action. Capacity to carry heavy weaponry. The P-47 Thunderbolt was designed to be an aircraft of ground attack in addition to hunting enemy aircraft. Its ability to carry heavy weaponry was a key factor that helped solidify its position as one of the most feared aircraft of the war. The Thunderbolt could carry up to 2,500 pounds of pumps and even T.50 caliber machine guns in its fuselage, making it extremely effective in both air combat and ground attack missions. For Japanese pilots, this represented a double threat. Not only was the P-47 difficult to shoot down in aerial combat, but it was also capable of destroying ground targets with deadly precision. This versatility made the Thunderbolt an extremely efficient aircraft on several fronts, from air defense until strategic bombing missions. Furthermore, the firepower, the P-47's performance in aerial combat was devastating. The 50 caliber machine guns it carried were capable of destroy enemy aircraft with a reduced number of shots, making it a veritable machine of destruction in the sky. For Japanese pilots, accustomed to lighter and faster fighters, the presence of a P-47 armed with such heavy firepower represented a huge challenge. Long-range capability and landing at worse airfields. The P-47 was also designed for long-range flying, which was crucial in the Pacific theater of combat, where aircraft needed to cover vast areas and conduct combat missions far from their bases. Its fuel load capacity, it was one of the largest of its time, allowing him to carry out missions over long distances without having to return quickly to base. This autonomy also meant that American pilots could continue to put pressure on Japanese pilots, attacking them wherever they were. This altered the dynamics of the confrontations, as the Japanese pilots, in turn, were more limited by the range of their own aircraft, which did not have the same fuel load capacity for long flights. Another important point was the landing capability at less prepared airfields, which was common in the Pacific. Unlike some aircraft that required well-prepared runways, the P-47 was designed to operate on adverse conditions, being able to land on shorter runways and even on more rugged terrain. For Japanese pilots, this also represented a difficulty, as the logistics of attacking American airfields became more complex, with the P-47 being able to operate in hard-to-reach locations. Aerial warfare during World War II was not merely a battle of machines and technology. It also involved a strong psychological component. When Japanese pilots faced the P-47 Thunderbolt, the psychological impact was immense and cannot be underestimated. They were accustomed to agile hunting, using tactics that relied on the speed and maneuverability of their aircraft. But the P-47 presented a form of combat that challenged all their concepts. The P-47's perception of invulnerability for Japanese pilots, the P-47 represented an almost insurmountable enigma. In traditional aerial combat, Japanese pilots were accustomed to a dynamic of quick attack, utilizing the agility of fighter jets such as the Mitsubishi A6M04 evasive maneuvers. They were trained to attack quickly, hit their targets, and distance themselves before the enemy had time to react. However, with the P-47, this type of tactic didn't work the same way. The P-47 was not agile, but his resistance and firepower, this altered the dynamics of the combat. When the Japanese pilots attacked the Thunderbolt, they quickly realized that it could be hit multiple times, but still remain in combat. Pressing with heavy fire, impression of invulnerability, it was psychologically destabilizing, as Japanese pilots were accustomed to the idea that a successful attack would result in the destruction of the enemy. With the P-47, this concept was broken. Psychological shock it was profound, as the opposing pilots realized they couldn't simply shoot down the aircraft using the methods they were accustomed to. the feeling of frustration and despair in accounts from Japanese pilots who fought against the P-47. Many expressed a strong feeling of frustration and despair during combat. The fact that the P-47 could withstand severe damage and continue flying created a scenario of uncertainty. For Japanese pilots, who were accustomed to maneuvering with agility and shooting down enemies quickly, the Thunderbolt represented a constant threat which seemed impossible to avoid or destroy. In many cases, Japanese pilots tried to flee from combat zones as soon as they identified a P-47 in their path, knowing that engaging a Thunderbolt meant exposing themselves to a disadvantageous fight. This behavior, which denoted fear and frustration, is a clear reflection of the psychological impact that the presence of the P-47 caused. The fear of being shot down without a real chance of escape generated a feeling of powerlessness, something unusual for experienced fighter pilots like the Japanese. Furthermore, the psychological resilience they needed to maintain high morale while facing this formidable adversary was tested to the limit. Many accounts indicate that after several encounters with the P-47, Japanese pilots began to question their own abilities and the effectiveness of their aircraft, creating a wave of distrust which spread among the units. Change in Japanese tactics. The presence of the P-47 in the skies over the Pacific forced Japanese pilots to adapt their tactics previously. They focused on quick, direct battles, confident in the agility of their aircraft to avoid enemy fire. But when the P-47 entered the scene, many of these tactics became obsolete. Japanese pilots realized that in confrontations with the Thunderbolt, the evasive maneuver strategy, it was no longer as effective since the P-47 could continue to pursue them even after being hit. This forced change in tactics further increased the nervousness and the anxiety of the Japanese pilots. They began to adopt more cautious strategies, avoiding direct confrontations with the Thunderbolt whenever possible, which negatively impacted the morale of their units and the confidence of their leaders. The feeling of not being prepared to combat such a formidable aircraft created a feeling of vulnerability within Japanese aviation. The psychological effects of fighting a giant. The P-47 was often described as a giant in the Pacific skies, not only because of its size and weight, but also because of its impressive durability and firepower. The fact that such an imposing fighter continued to fight, even after being severely damaged, challenged the comprehension of Japanese pilots. Many of them began to wonder how an aircraft could be so resilient and yet so effective in combat. This generated a perception shock, which affected how they mentally prepared for war. The image of the P-47 as an unbeatable opponent, it spread rapidly among Japanese pilots, creating a climate of dread. It was a plane that wouldn't die, and pilots began to approach it with a fear rarely seen in aerial combat. Psychological despair. Challenge of facing something so difficult to defeat was one of the main factors that led Japanese pilots to adopt more defensive rather than aggressive attitudes, weakening their effectiveness during combat. Conclusion of the psychological impact. The psychological impact on Japanese pilots when facing the P-47 was profound and lasting. Aircraft resistance. Combined with its immense firepower, the P-47 destabilized opposing pilots, who were accustomed to defeating Allied aircraft more easily. For them, the P-47 became not only a difficult war machine to defeat, but also a symbol of resilience, invincibility, and frustration. In short, the P-47 profoundly altered the dynamics of aerial combat in the Pacific, leaving a psychological mark on Japanese pilots that took time to overcome. The P-47 Thunderbolt not only surprised Japanese pilots due to its resilience and firepower, but also had a direct impact on combat strategies and in the results of air battles of the Pacific. Its technical superiority, combined with the innovative tactics of their pilots, they shifted the balance of air power between the Allies and the Japanese Empire, leaving an indelible mark on the war. The firepower of the P-47 and its effectiveness in aerial battles. One of the main advantages of the P-47 was heavy weapons that he was carrying. Equipped with up to 50 caliber machine guns, the Thunderbolt possessed overwhelming firepower, capable of destroying enemy aircraft with a reduced number of shots. During air battles in the Pacific, this characteristic proved a crucial advantage, allowing American pilots to eliminate targets quickly, even in direct confrontations with more agile aircraft, such as the Mitsubishi A6M0. This ability to inflict massive damage at longer distances surprised Japanese pilots, who were accustomed to fighting faster and more agile fighters, but with more limited armament. The P-47 could not only attack at long range, but also could withstand the damage from aerial combat, and it continued fighting. This caused the Japanese pilots, in many situations, to feel at a disadvantage, since they could not rely on the agility of their planes to escape the immense firepower of the Thunderbolt. During the Battle of Leyte, one of the largest air battles in the Pacific, American planes, led by P-47 Thunderbolts, were essential for destroy the Japanese Air Force. The resilience and firepower of the P-47s were determining factors in the victory of the Allied forces. This confrontation was a clear example of how the Thunderbolt's technical superiority affected the course of aerial battles, weakening Japanese air defenses and altering the dynamics of combat, the ability to withstand damage and continue fighting. Another crucial point that the P-47 brought to the battlefield was its ability to withstand severe damage and continue in combat during ground attack missions. Many Thunderbolts returned to base with significant damage, such as holes in their fuselages and even damaged engines, but still managed to fly back. This resilience was a psychological nightmare for the Japanese pilots, who were used to planes that did not have the same ability to withstand such damage. The P-47 became a symbol of invincibility in the Pacific skies. Even if Japanese pilots tried to attack forcefully, the Thunderbolt's heavy machine guns and its ability to absorb fire without losing effectiveness made it a difficult opponent to destroy. The aircraft's resilience not only challenged the effectiveness of Japanese attacks, but also allowed Allied pilots to carry out missions of ground attack with a level of security which enemy aircraft could not offer. Impact on Allied combat strategies. The introduction of the P-47 also brought a change in combat strategies adopted by the Allies. The Thunderbolt, with its ability to withstand enemy fire and inflict damage at long range, was used to dominate the airspace and provide vital support to ground forces. A versatility. The P-47, which could be used as both a fighter and an attack aircraft, gave the Allies a tactical flexibility crucial for winning battles on multiple fronts. American pilots began using the P-47 more frequently, aggressive and strategic, focusing on saturation attacks to overwhelm enemy defenses. With their long flight range, the P-47s were able to perform extended missions, attacking targets in enemy territory and destroying vital infrastructure, such as bridges, railways, and military installations, with lethal precision. Furthermore, the P-47s were a direct response to Mitsubishi A6M0, a Japanese fighter that had significant superiority in terms of handling. Although the Zero was more agile, the P-47 compensated with its superior resistance and weaponry. When confronted with Japanese fighters like the Zero, Allied pilots with their P-47s could to attack directly. They were confident that, even with damage, they would continue fighting. This confidence was a crucial advantage for the Allied pilots. The impact on Japanese forces. For the Japanese pilots, the P-47s represented a challenge of a magnitude they had not anticipated. Combat strategies. Strategies that had been effective against other Allied aircraft proved useless against the Thunderbolt. The inability to shoot down a P-47 easily resulted in a growing sense of powerlessness within the Japanese Air Force. Each encounter with the P-47 became a psychological battle, Where the confidence in success it diminished with each defeat, the Japanese forces began to realize that, without the superior agility of their planes and with the immense resistance for the P-47, there were no effective tactics to overcome this adversary. For many Japanese pilots, the confrontation with the P-47 became synonymous with despair because they knew their chances of winning were extremely limited. Conclusion of the technical impact on battles. Impact of technical superiority of the P-47. Thunderbolt was undoubtedly one of the factors that changed the course of air battles in the Pacific. Its resilience and firepower were crucial to the Allied victory. For Japanese pilots, the P-47 represented an overwhelming threat. This forced them to alter their tactics and rethink their battlefield strategies. The Thunderbolt not only caused physical damage to Japanese aircraft, but also profoundly affected the morale and confidence of the Japanese pilots, who began to understand that they were dealing with an adversary they could not easily defeat. After its introduction into the Pacific air battles, the P-47 Thunderbolt began to demonstrate its effectiveness, not only in individual engagements, but as part of the broader strategy of the Allied forces. Its early victories were emblematic, and the impact of these achievements marked the beginning of Allied air supremacy regarding the Japanese Empire. The combination of resilience, firepower, and innovative tactics quickly made the P-47 a central piece in the fight against Japan. The role of the P-47 in the early victories. The P-47's first major victory was seen during the combat missions in the Pacific soon after entering service. Allied pilots quickly realized that the Thunderbolt's resilience and firepower could be used to destabilize Japanese air defenses and secure battlefield superiority. In June 1943, the P-47 had its first major victory during the Battle of Saipan there. The P-47 was used to attack strategic points behind enemy lines, such as airfields and supply bases, while simultaneously engaging Japanese fighters. These attacks were carried out with high-impact bombs and with their .50 caliber machine guns, which proved their effectiveness in destroying ground targets, as well as shooting down Japanese aircraft in direct combat. This victory was important, not only because it marked a success on the battlefield, but also because it demonstrated that the P-47 could adapt quickly to the Pacific theater of war. It was not only effective against Japanese fighter planes, but could also be used as a tool of air dominance and ground attack, which made him indispensable to the Allied forces. The evolution of combat strategies. One of the reasons why the P-47 was so successful in its early victories was evolution of combat tactics used by Allied pilots. Initially, P-47 pilots faced challenges due to their poor maneuverability, especially when compared to the agile Japanese Zero. However, over time, American pilots learned to maximize the advantages of Thunderbolt, creating new combat strategies that were more effective in terrains like the Pacific. One tactic that proved successful was straight-line attack. Unlike aerobatic maneuvers, P-47 pilots preferred to attack directly from the front, using their speed and endurance to absorb the damage while maintaining the offensive. This method required courage, but proved very effective against Japanese fighters who were not accustomed to this type of approach. An ability to operate at high altitudes, this was also a crucial factor. The P-47 could be used for missions of ultra altitude, how much low level, such as attacks on ground targets. It quickly proved to be a versatile aircraft, adapting well to demands of the war in the Pacific and overcoming the limitations of Japanese fighters, which were more focused on fast and agile air combat. Impact on Japanese forces for the Japanese pilots. The successive victories of the P-47 were demoralizing. They began to realize that despite their skill in aerial combat, the Japanese fighters simply could not compete with terror resistance and the firepower of the Thunderbolt. What once seemed to be a decisive advantage, the agility of Japanese fighter jets, was thwarted by the immense resistance of the P-47. That inability to defeat the P-47 was a psychological blow to the Japanese pilots who were used to leading the air battles. Historical accounts indicate that many Japanese aviators began to see the P-47 as an unbeatable opponent, and the pressure to find an effective way to counter it increased as Allied victories piled up. In terms of strategic impact, victories of the P-47 also helped to neutralize the Japanese Air Force in the Pacific. This gave the Allies a decisive advantage. Japanese aircraft, which had previously dominated the skies, began to face increasing difficulties as the P-47 proved to be a virtually insurmountable obstacle. The expansion of the use of the P-47 in the Pacific theater of warfare. As the P-47 began to achieve victories, its presence on the front lines increased. Soon, it was used not only as an air superiority fighter, but also as ground support aircraft and long-range bomber. The P-47, with its robustness and bomb-carrying capacity, became an essential tool for the Allied forces, allowing them to attack not only Japanese aircraft, but also strategic targets in enemy territory. From 1944 onwards, the P-47 became one of the most reliable and feared aircraft in the Pacific. During the battles of Iwo Jima and Okinawa, the Thunderbolt played a key role, destroying enemy forces and hitting Japanese airports and providing vital support for ground troops. The P-47's resilience and versatility, combined with its early victories, helped solidify its position, Allied air superiority, and paving the way for final victory. After his first victories in the Pacific, the P-47 Thunderbolt, it didn't take long for it to be introduced into European theater, where he played a crucial role in aerial combat operations. During World War II, his transition to the European front was marked by versatility and by its ability to adapt to the different demands of the new battlefield, where the challenges were distinct but equally intense. The entry of the P-47 into the war over Europe transformed aerial strategies and had a profound impact on strategic bombing operations and large-scale air combat. The P-47 in the European campaign, bombing and air combat in the European theater. The P-47 became one of the main aircraft of interception and ground attack. Its primary role was to provide air superiority to allies, especially on missions of strategic bombing. The Thunderbolt's ability to charge heavy bombs and to strike targets with precision. This made it an essential support for bombing missions, such as those carried out by United States 8th Air Force. The P-47 played a critical role during the daytime bombing missions, where airplanes like the B-17 Flying Fortress and the B-24 Liberator, they were accompanied by P-47s, which provided air cover to protect the bombers against attacks from enemy fighter jets, such as Messerschmitt Bf-109 and Focke-Wulf 190. The P-47, with its massive firepower and ability to operate at high altitudes, was fundamental to the defense against bombers against German fighter planes, offering vital protection and allowing Allied forces to carry out crucial airstrikes. During the Battle of Normandy in 1944, the P-47 was instrumental in supporting land operations. He not only provided air cover against enemy fighters, but also attacked strategic points such as landing strips, communication facilities, and infrastructure targets. The P-47's ability to carry out attacks with high impact bombs and their heavy machine guns, they made it an essential tool for destruction of ground targets. Your change in combat strategy, aversion to the loss of Allied aircraft in the European theater. Allied pilots quickly realized that the P-47 was a very different adversary from the German fighters they had faced until then. The P-47 was not the most agile fighter, but its resistance and ability to inflict heavy damage, they changed the way American pilots approached aerial combat. The main characteristic of the P-47 in European combat was fire superiority. He didn't need to be the fastest or the most agile. His mission was to ensure that the enemies were destroyed before they could cause damage to the Allied forces. Furthermore, the high-altitude combat strategy, it became an important tactic. The P-47 had a unique ability to operate effectively higher altitudes, where he could intercept German fighters before they could reach Allied bomber formations. The combination of resistance and firepower, it gave American pilots the confidence that, even in prolonged battles, the P-47 would be able to stay in the fight and continue attacking. The P-47 in the Battle of France and advances on German soil, the impact of the P-47 expanded when it began to get directly involved in ground attack operations, in missions that ranged from the destruction of German airstrips until the attack on supply and communication lines. The P-47 proved to be extremely effective. During the D-Day, when Allied forces landed in Normandy, the P-47 was used to destroy the German defenses and provide air support to ground forces. Throughout 1944 and 1945, the P-47 was used in operations on enemy soil, performing attacks on infrastructure targets and destroying ammunition depots and military vehicles, becoming a constant threat to the logistics of the German army. Allied pilots were now better prepared to operate in adverse environment of European soil, executing quick attack maneuvers and retreating before becoming targets of enemy fire. The P-47 and the defeat of the Luftwaffe. The P-47 also played a decisive role in der Rote der Luftwaffe, the German Air Force. As Allied aircraft began to dominate European airspace, the firepower of the P-47 was crucial to disperse enemy air forces. The P-47 became a nightmare for the German fighters, which were no match for the Thunderbolt's firepower and resilience. With increasing pressure on the Luftwaffe, German pilots began to be forced to operate in an increasingly unfavorable environment, which led to loss of air superiority German. A der Rote der Luftwaffe. The fact that the P-47s were in their hands was a key factor in the final victory for the Allies in Europe. Without air control, Germany was vulnerable to constant air raids and bombings, resulting in irreparable losses. The impact of the P-47 on the destruction of the German Air Force was immeasurable. As it nullified air superiority tactics, German aviators were forced to change their strategies, which ultimately compromised the effectiveness of the Third Reich's forces. After the end of World War II, the P-47 Thunderbolt established itself as one of the most important aircraft in the history of military aviation. Its contribution during the war was undeniable, but the P-47's impact was not limited to its victories in the skies of the Pacific and Europe. After the conflict, the P-47 left a legacy, lasting legacy, influencing not only the military tactics aviation, but also the development of new aircraft and the technological progress of military aviation. The end of production and its last missions, the P-47 was withdrawn from service shortly after Allied victory in 1945, being replaced by more modern fighters such as the F-86 Sabre and the F-100 Super Sabre, which possessed superior maneuverability and speed. However, even after its withdrawal from the front lines, the P-47 continued to be used by various air forces around the world, especially in Allied countries that needed robust and easy-to-maintain attack aircraft. During the post-war period, many P-47s were converted to ground attack missions, performing close air support operations and tactical bombings in smaller conflicts. The P-47 was also used by countries of Latin America, Africa, and Asia, who adopted him because of his durability and adaptability under various operating conditions. In some places, the Thunderbolt was used until the 1960s, a testament to its durability and engineering quality. The influence on the development of new models, the legacy of the P-47 can also be seen in evolution of military aircraft after the Second World War. His robust design, with its steel fuselage and radial engine, influenced the post-war fighter aircraft construction. The lesson learned from P-47 was clear: resistance and durability. They were just as important as speed and maneuverability. Although cold war aircraft, such as the F-4 Phantom and the F-16 Fighting Falcon, were they more technologically advanced, the concept of creating aircraft that combined resistance to damage with firepower, it endured. The P-47 became a precursor to tactical attack aircraft where robustness, it was just as important as agility, ability to operate under extreme conditions, and its versatility. Aircraft designed for air combat and ground attack missions served as the basis for the design of many subsequent models. Popularity in the popular imagination. Another lasting legacy of the P-47 was its popularity in popular imagination. The Thunderbolt has become a symbol of strength, resilience, and courage. Many documentaries, books, and movies, they highlighted the importance of the P-47, perpetuating its image as one of the most formidable aircraft of World War II. Its durability in combat and its robust design also inspired several representations in military model making and in video games about war. The psychological impact that the P-47 had on both Allied and enemy pilots was one of the reasons for its lasting popularity for Allied pilots. The P-47 became a symbol of victory and of overcoming adversity. For the Japanese pilots, however, the P-47 remained etched in their memory as an adversary, impossible to defeat easily. An airplane that almost no one wanted to face it, the withdrawal and the recognition. With the end of the war and the beginning of Cold War, many World War II aircraft, including the P-47, were retired. However, even after being withdrawn from active service, the P-47 was never forgotten. Many war veterans still remembered with respect and admiration the machine that gave them so much support and was sometimes the key to victory. Respectability. P-47's numbers only increased over time. In the following decades, the Thunderbolt was officially recognized in several military ceremonies, and for aviation historians, he was included in aviation museums and remains one of the most revered aircraft for its contribution to the Allied victory. In 1997, a restored reproduction, a P-47, was displayed at National Museum of the United States Air Force. Marking an official recognition of its historical importance, the P-47 and lessons for modern air forces today, the legacy of the P-47 still resonates in modern air forces. Durability, versatility, and adaptability. These qualities remain essential for the development of military aircraft. The P-47 taught air forces that in many situations, an aircraft, robust and reliable, it can be more effective than one super-maneuverable aircraft, especially when the objective is to carry out long-range missions and withstand adverse combat conditions. Furthermore, the theory of combining capabilities, the P-47 not only fought other aircraft, but also played a crucial role in ground support, influencing the creation of aircraft such as the Su-10 Thunderbolt, soon the Thunderbolt, which was developed in the 1970s and became an icon in close air support, is a new, more modern and specialized aircraft that carries the P-47 name as a direct tribute to its durability and effectiveness on the battlefield. The P-47 Thunderbolt, although retired after World War II, had a profound impact on pilot training and development of air forces in the following decades. Its unique characteristics and the lessons learned during its operation directly influenced how the air forces of various nations trained their pilots and how combat aircraft were designed and used in the post-war period. The durability, resilience, and firepower of the P-47 helped establish new parameters for aviator training, especially in modern air warfare. The influence on pilot training, the P-47 was a relatively easy aircraft to fly, but at the same time, It challenged pilots to learn how to handle its unique features, such as its resistance to damage and its combination of firepower with limited maneuverability. In post-war training, many of these characteristics were incorporated into the development of training procedures for pilots. The main lesson that aviation trainers were able to draw from the P-47 experience was the importance of preparing pilots for high-intensity combat with their resistance to damage and the constant firepower. They became crucial. The P-47 showed that an aircraft, it didn't need to be the fastest to be effective. It could be highly efficient if it were designed to withstand damage and continue operating. This led air forces to place more emphasis on resilience strategies and the training of pilots to operate under pressure. For example, Allied pilots who had learned to handle the P-47 in combat had to adapt your tactics to ensure that the aircraft could perform its function optimally. Resistance training and ground support became more valued in the air forces, and pilots were taught to rely on them, aircraft durability, to withstand damage during combat. The concept that an aircraft could be hit without being knocked down was transferred to training of long-duration missions, such as those of strategic bombing, where resilience and the ability to survive attacks were crucial factors for mission success. Impact on the formation of post-war combat aircraft. In addition to influencing pilot training, the P-47 also had a significant impact on development of new aircraft in the post-war period. His structural strength and versatility in air and ground combat, they inspired engineers and aircraft designers in various nations. The concept of more robust fighter jets and versatile, it was absorbed by future generations of attack aircraft, which continued to use the lessons of the Thunderbolt in their design. The A-10 Thunderbolt II developed in the 1960s and 1970s for close air support. It was one of them or direct legacies. The A-10 was designed to withstand damage and continue operating, just like the P-47, and both share the goal of providing direct air support to ground forces. Thus, the P-47 directly influenced the development of attack aircraft, which emphasized resistance to enemy fire and to ability to operate in adverse conditions. Furthermore, the lessons learned from the P-47 also influenced the design of faster and more agile combat aircraft, such as the interceptor fighters of the Cold War, which began to incorporate heavy weaponry and more resistant structures to withstand damage during prolonged combat. Although the focus on more agile aircraft has become predominant, the legacy of resilience and firepower, the legacy left by the P-47, is still visible in modern attack and air support aircraft. The impact on the air forces of various countries. P-47 had an impact not only on the United States Air Force, but also on other nations around the world. Many countries which receive P-47 type aircraft, as France, Brazil, Mexico, and Great Britain, they used the model for strengthen its air defenses during the post-war period. These air forces incorporated the P-47 into pilot training and their combat strategies, taking advantage of your versatility and durability in ground attack and bombing missions. The presence of the P-47 in air forces of Allied countries also contributed to the development of more robust air defense programs, who learned to combine the agility of modern airplanes with the resilience and firepower of aircraft like the P-47. This helped create an Air Force model that valued both air defense, how much close air support, which in turn influenced the global military strategy in the years following the war. The legacy of the P-47 in modern military aviation today. The legacy of the P-47 Thunderbolt continues to be remembered not only by World War II veterans, but also because modern military aviation, the concept of robust aircraft, the ability to perform combat missions under adverse conditions, and continue operating after sustaining damage has been transferred to many contemporary aircraft models, such as the A-10 Thunderbolt II, which is considered the direct successor to the P-47 in terms of mission and design. Furthermore, the P-47 left an indelible mark on military aviation culture, often remembered for his decisive contribution for the Allied victory in World War II and for the legacy that inspired future generations of aviators and aircraft engineers. The P-47 Thunderbolt was not only an impressive war machine in the skies of World War II, but it also became a symbol of resistance, strength, and overcoming adversity, which transcended military history. After its retirement, the P-47 continued to be a recurring theme in media, films, and documentaries, where its image was solidified as an icon of military aviation. Its legacy as one of the most feared and effective war, he was immortalized in various ways, helping to maintain his living memory for future generations. The P-47 in pop culture, war movies, and TV series, the P-47 Thunderbolt became a recurring character in war films and documentaries, especially those that depict the World War III's image as a sturdy and formidable aircraft has been immortalized in several film productions, which have highlighted it as a symbol of courage and resilience. One of the most notable films to feature the P-47 was the classic The Conquest of the West, The War Lover, 1962. The film, starring Steve McQueen, highlights the P-47 as one of the fighter planes used in bombing missions during the war, showcasing not only its importance in aerial combat, but also its versatility in ground support missions. The Thunderbolt's presence in this film helped solidify the P-47's image as a tough and unbeatable warplane. Another famous film that depicted the P-47 was Wings of Freedom. Flying Tigers, 1942, The Man from U.S. War, a film that chronicles the aerial battles during World War II in the Pacific Theater. Although the film focuses on a group of American aviators fighting the Japanese, the P-47 appears as one of the air support aircraft in combat missions, showcasing its resilience and firepower. This type of representation helped solidify the P-47 as one of the most formidable aircraft of the war. In addition to these films, the P-47 has also appeared in productions of historical documentaries about World War II. Many of these documentaries highlight the victories of the P-47 in crucial battles, such as the Battle of Leyte in the Pacific and the Battle of Normandy in Europe. The documentary The Mighty Thunderbolt, 2005, is an example of how the P-47 is celebrated in the media. It offers a detailed view of the aircraft, its achievements during the war, and the strategic importance of the Thunderbolt in the conflict. P-47 in books and publications, in addition to films and documentaries. The P-47 Thunderbolt has also been extensively depicted in books about World War II. Authors such as Edwin C. Beers, in his book Thunderbolt, The P-47 in World War II. These books detail the air operations in which the P-47 played a crucial role, offering a more technical view of its capabilities and the experience of Allied pilots. These books, along with other accounts from war veterans, help to immortalize the image of the P-47 as a warplane, indestructible and fundamental to the Allied victory. Military history books often highlight the P-47 not only as a fighting machine, but as an example of how technology and design aircraft can be adapted to meet the needs of modern combat. The work fighter aircraft of the Second World War, for example, it provides a detailed analysis of the main aircraft of the war, including the P-47, and places it among the most outstanding aircraft. Thanks to its ability to survive intense combat, the P-47 in model making and the aviation products market, P-47 also left its mark on the market of model making and collectibles due to its popularity and historical importance. The P-47 became one of the most miniature models, with scale replicas being produced for military model enthusiasts. These miniatures help preserve the memory of the Thunderbolt and offer a way for aviation and military history fans to connect with the legacy of the P-47 as P-47. Model replicas, they are frequently included in aviation exhibitions and sold in Stores dot military model making and collectibles, where enthusiasts can obtain detailed replicas of the Thunderbolt, complete with paint schemes and markings from the different squadrons that operated the aircraft during the war. This reflects not only the interest in this aircraft, but also the continued respect for its historical significance. P-47 and its appearances in video games. With the advent of video games, the P-47 became an icon within the flight simulator and air combat game industry. Games like War, Thunder and WW2 Sturmovik, they allowed players to get their hands on the controls of a virtual P-47, recreating the aerial combat of World War II and reliving the experience of Allied pilots during the war. Thunderbolt, with its target destruction capability and impressive durability, it was a favorite among players who could experience firsthand what it was like to be a World War II pilot, battling with one of the most formidable aircraft in history. These games helped Toto keep the memory alive of the P-47, in addition to expanding its legacy to a younger audience who may not be familiar with the aircraft's true history, but are still drawn to its legacy, iconicity on the aerial battlefield. P-47 as a symbol of resistance and courage in the media. The P-47 became more than just a wear machine. He became a symbol of resistance and resilience. Yours resiliency in combat, your ability to withstand damage and still continue to fly, and its versatility in aerial combat and ground attack. It became a perfect representation of the fighting spirit and determination of Allied pilots. For many, the P-47 is the embodiment of the power to persevere in the face of adversity. And this message continues to be conveyed through films, books and video games. The legacy of the P-47 Thunderbolt continues to be preserved and celebrated through exhibitions and museums dedicated to the history of aviation and World War II. Even decades after the end of the conflict, the Thunderbolt remains an icon of resistance and of military power. The Boeing 737 is one of the most visited and studied aircraft in museums around the world. Its presence in exhibitions not only keeps the memory of its contributions alive, but also offers an opportunity for new generations to learn more about this powerful aircraft and the pilots who operated it. Aviation museums and exhibitions dedicated to the P-47 in many aviation museums in the United States and other Allied countries. The P-47 Thunderbolt is a central piece of exhibits about the World War II museums, like the National Museum of the United States Air Force, in Dayton, Ohio, your Royal Air Force Museum in London. These are just a few examples of where the P-47 can be seen up close. These museums feature replicas, interactive exhibits, and powerful stories from veterans who helped preserve the history of the P-47. The National Museum of the U.S. Air Force, for example, it has a restored version of the P-47 Thunderbolt on display, is a collection of artifacts, photos and videos about the aircraft's operation during the war. Alongside the aircraft, visitors can learn about the battles in which the P-47 was involved, as well as the pilots who flew it and the aircraft's strategic importance on the Pacific and European fronts. This type of exhibit helps educate the public about the crucial impact of the P-47 and how it helped secure the Allied victory. The P-47 as a centerpiece in war expositions. The exhibitions about World War II, they often include the P-47 as one of the central pieces due to its strategic importance. The aircraft represents not only an unbeatable fighting machine, but also the determination of the Allied pilots who faced adverse conditions to achieve victory. In many museums, the Thunderbolt is highlighted alongside other famous aircraft of the time, such as the B-17 Flying Fortress and the P-51 Mustang, as one of the main combat aircraft that marked the war. In addition to being a centerpiece, the P-47 is often accompanied by videos and simulations of combat missions, where visitors can better understand the flight tactics used by P-47 pilots. Some exhibits even recreate the "I am the engine" of the P-47 and the sensation of flying, offering a more immersive experience. For aviation enthusiasts and those who want to feel a little of what it was like to air combat pressure faced by the pilots. Traveling exhibitions and tributes to the P-47. In addition to the permanent exhibits, the P-47 Thunderbolt is also part of traveling exhibitions that travel to different countries, bringing the history of this aircraft to diverse audiences. These exhibitions are important because they broaden the scope of historical memory, allowing more people around the world to learn about and recognize the importance of the P-47, especially in countries that may not have been directly involved in the battles, but which have a deep respect for the contribution of the Allied forces. During these exhibitions, the P-47 is often accompanied by tributes to veterans who flew in their aircraft. Veterans meetings, these events, where former P-47 pilots gather to share their experiences and stories with the public, are exciting and allow for a direct connection between visitors and war heroes. These encounters offer a unique opportunity to preserve the memory of the pilots, often bringing to light stories of bravery and personal sacrifice. The P-47 at model and reconstruction exhibitions alongside aviation museums, the P-47 Thunderbolt is also a central figure in the world of military model making. Various exhibitions of model airplanes around the world, they stand out, miniature models, detailed descriptions of the P-47, with faithful recreations of the aircraft and its original paintings. These exhibits offer enthusiasts the opportunity to see the P-47 in person, all its forms, from the most common to the rarest variants. Learn about the differences in armament, design, and performance between the various models. Aviation modelers dedicate hours to creating detailed replicas, which not only capture the appearance of the P-47, but also seek to accurately represent the flight experience. These models, displayed in competitions and exhibitions, help to maintain the legacy of the P-47 alive and constantly evolving, allowing a new generation of aviation fans and enthusiasts to experience history in a more interactive and accessible way. The P-47 and the teaching of military history. In addition to its presence in museums and aviation exhibitions, the P-47 also plays an important role in aviation education. Military history in schools and universities. Many educational programs, they include the study of the P-47 in their classes on the World War II, using the airplane as an example of innovative military technology and like our presentation of the Allied war effort. The P-47 is frequently used in resumes of military history, where it is analyzed not only for its impact on aerial combat, but also for cultural and psychological legacy that he left for history. The impact of the P-47 Thunderbolt was not limited to its performance during the World War II. Your resistance capacity, firepower, and versatility, they played a key role in evolution of modern air forces. It is pilot training, which later became protagonists of combat aviation in the post-war period. The legacy of the P-47 influenced not only combat techniques, but also the way air forces operated. They trained their aviators to face the challenges of modern warfare. With their resilience and adaptation to different combat scenarios, they have become more essential than ever. The P-47 and the change in air combat tactics. The P-47, with its impressive durability and powerful weaponry, represented a change in air combat tactics during and after World War II. Before the introduction of the Thunderbolt, the agility and speed, these were often the most valued qualities in a combat aircraft. However, the success of the P-47 showed that resistance to damage, ability to take damage and keep fighting, and the consistent firepower, they could be equally or even more decisive in aerial combat. This transformation in combat tactics was important not only for pilots in World War II, but also for pilot training in the following decades. When dealing with an aircraft like the P-47, pilots began to realize the importance of focus on using aggressive tactics and no attack with persistence, even when the enemy counterattacked forcefully. This concept of resilience and constant attack has become a fundamental feature of pilot training in post-war air forces. The P-47 and post-war pilot training after the war. The P-47 continued to influence the pilot training and education for air forces around the world. Ability to operate in adverse conditions and tonnage for damage resistance. These were characteristics that became essential in training courses. Aviators, especially beginners, began to be taught to develop resistance to enemy fire, understanding the importance of carrying heavy weapons and to maintain persistence in missions. Furthermore, modern air forces have begun to train your pilots to operate under high pressure and to take advantage of the durability of their aircraft during prolonged combat. The P-47 was the precursor to this approach of long-range and durable air combat, since Allied airmen were trained to focus not only on maneuverability, but also in-flight time control. That aircraft endurance management, it is ability to continue attacking while absorbing damage, the concept of survival in combat. The P-47, as represented by the P-47, became an integral part of pilot training worldwide. Strategies such as the saturation tactic, which consisted of attacking with full force, were influenced by this type of aircraft. In the years following the war, many modern aircraft, they retained characteristics of robustness and resistance, with the goal of allowing pilots to operate for extended periods of time and in intense combat conditions. Just as the P-47 did during World War II, the transition to jet aviation, the P-47 as a pioneer, went to jet aviation. As the P-47 began to become the dominant force in the Cold War, many of the principles established by the P-47 were still present in the new aircraft. Aircraft such as the F-86 Sabre and the F-4 Phantom, they were able to adopt the lessons learned from Thunderbolt, especially in relation toned for resistance to damage and constant firepower. The P-47 also influenced the transition of propeller aviation for the jet aviation because of its qualities of durability and versatility. They helped designers better understand how to create aircraft. Multifunctional, the concept of an aircraft that could operate in multiple types of missions, air combat, ground attack, close air support, was incorporated into jet aviation. Aircraft such as the A-10 Thunderbolt II, also designed for operations of close air support, were directly influenced by the durability and ruggedness design of the P-47, the legacy of the P-47. In the modern Air Force, the legacy of the P-47 is also visible in how modern air forces they currently operate. The idea that a fighter jet needs to be resilient and capable of operating under constant attack is still a fundamental principle of air forces in many parts of the world. Even though modern aircraft like the F-22 Raptor or the F-35 Lightning II to be faster, more agile, and equipped with cutting-edge technologies, the concept of resistance and persistence in combat, as represented by the P-47, it continues to be a fundamental lesson in pilot training and development. The A-10 Thunderbolt IIAs I mentioned earlier, the P-47 is perhaps the most obvious example of how it inspired the creation of modern aircraft. Its design and mission, ground attack resistance to damage and firepower, make it a spiritual successor from the P-47, retaining the name Thunderbolt and reflecting the same principles of durability and effectiveness in combat. The P-47 Thunderbolt, in addition to its military and technical importance, became a true cultural symbol in history. Its immense resilience, firepower, and versatility on the battlefronts of World War II, they secured him a prominent place, not only in history books, but also in collective memory of various generations. The P-47 transcended the battlefield, being remembered in monuments, tributes, and celebrations which continue to this day, not only as a war machine, But as a symbol of courage overcoming adversity and sacrifice, the P-47 as a symbol of strength and resilience, the idea that the P-47 was an unbeatable endurance machine, it shaped its cultural image. For many, the P-47 became a symbol of overcoming adversity, representing the unwavering persistence of the Allied pilots facing formidable enemies. Their ability to absorb severe damage and continuing the mission, often against all odds, made her an icon of resilience. This character of invincibility, combined with its firepower and resilience, transformed the P-47 into a symbol of the strength of the alliance between the United States and its allies. During the war, pilots knew that their main advantage when flying the P-47 was the certainty that even if hit, the aircraft would still give them the opportunity to complete the mission and return to base. For later generations, the P-47 came to symbolize fighting spirit and sacrifice of the men and women who served during the conflict. The P-47 in monuments and tributes, the presence of the P-47 in monuments and tributes, it is a tangible way to preserve their legacy and highlight their historical importance. Various war monuments around the world have been dedicated to Allied pilots and to contribution of combat aircraft, highlighting the P-47 as one of the most significant aircraft of World War II in National Museum of the United States Air Force. For example, Thunderbolt is one of the aircraft on display, being one of the most visited attractions by aviation enthusiasts and historians. This type of public preservation allows the P-47 to continue to be a symbol of collective memory, reminding everyone of the difficulties faced and the victories achieved during the conflict. Furthermore, many were cemeteries and military memorials. They dedicate plaques and inscriptions in honor of the aviators who piloted the P-47. These tributes not only celebrate the courage and heroism of the pilots, but also recognize the P-47's contribution to the Allied victory and its role in liberation of occupied territories. The P-47 at the victory anniversary celebrations in various parts of the world, especially in United States and Great Britain, the P-47 became a common topic during the Victory Day celebrations, like the VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, and the VJ Day, Victory over Japan Day. During these celebrations, the P-47 is frequently featured in parades, historic aircraft exhibitions, and veterans reunions who flew with the aircraft. These events serve as a form to keep the memory of the P-47 alive and of its pilots. As well as celebrating the victories achieved during the war, the Thunderbolt's presence at these ceremonies also highlights its relevance not only as a fighting machine, but as a representation of the fight for freedom and justice for many veterans and their families. The P-47 has become a symbol of sacrifice and dedication, and its presence in victory celebrations. It's a way to ensure that future generations never forget the heroic deeds of the men who operated these aircraft. P-47 in publications and personal accounts. In addition to formal celebrations, the P-47 also found its place in various other events, publications and personal accounts, many of them written by the pilots who flew the Thunderbolt themselves. Books such as Thunderbolt, the P-47 in World War II, Edwin C. Bears's works are just one example of how the P-47 continues to be celebrated in military literature, bringing to light stories of pilots who lived and died alongside this aircraft. These accounts not only document the P-47's combat feats, but also capture the humanity and courage of the pilots who faced the enemy aboard one of the most feared aircraft of the war. In addition to written accounts, the P-47 is also frequently mentioned in war films and documentaries which address the history of aviation in World War II. The mighty Thunderbolt 2005 and other documentaries highlight the importance of the P-47 on various battlefronts. ensuring that its media presence remains a vital part of the historical memory of military aviation. The P-47, in popular imagination and modern culture, the P-47, with its robust appearance and firepower, also earned a place in modern culture. He appeared in several video games, television series, and fiction books, where it is depicted as a symbol of courage and resilience. Games like War Thunder and IL-2 Sturmovik. They allow players to relive the aerial battles of World War II and pilot aircraft such as the P-47, further solidifying their presence in the market. Collective imagination. These games help pass on the Thunderbolt's history to a new generation of aviation and military history enthusiasts, keeping its legacy alive and relevant. Furthermore, the P-47 became a benchmark cultural for several generations of people interested in aviation. Its popularity in commemorations, documentaries, and games, it has helped build a loyal fan base who see it not only as a historic aircraft, but as a symbol of the indomitable spirit of the World War II. The P-47 Thunderbolt is more than just a historic aircraft, is a symbol of perseverance, innovation, and resilience, which left lasting lessons for air forces and modern aviation professionals. His contributions to World War II, the impact of the Thunderbolt, both on the battlefield and in the evolution of aviation, continues to resonate today. Even after the Thunderbolt's retirement, it serves as a reminder of its history, an example of how engineering and strategic adaptation can transform a fighter jet into one of the most powerful instruments of war of its time. Reflecting on the legacy of the P-47 offers us important lessons about resilience, innovation, and the importance of understand and improve one's own limitations. The lesson of resistance. The perception of invincibility. One of the greatest lessons that the P-47 taught us is the importance of resistance in an intense combat environment during the World War II. The P-47 was one of the most resilient aircraft of its time, capable of withstanding severe damage and still continuing in combat. It demonstrated that a fighter jet doesn't need to be the most agile or fastest to be effective. Instead, it can be resilient, absorbing attacks and returning to the battle with the same level of effectiveness. This quality of invincibility, the thrill that American and Allied pilots felt while operating the P-47, also had a psychological effect on enemy pilots, especially the Japanese. For Japanese pilots, the P-47 was a terrifying threat, as its ability to withstand damage and continue fighting made it seem unbeatable. Today, in a world where aerial combat technology continues to advance, the P-47 still serves as symbol of resilience in a context of extreme adversity, teaching us that sometimes true strength lies not in being the fastest or the most agile, but in being able to endure the challenges and move forward. Innovation in design and the evolution of aircraft. The P-47's robust design, with its steel fuselage, powerful radial engine, and ability to carry heavy weaponry, was an example of practical innovation. At a time when many aircraft prioritized agility, the P-47 brought a different approach. Innovative by emphasizing durability, firepower, and versatility, this design was not only effective in warfare, but also influenced the creation of modern aircraft like the A-10 Thunderbolt II, which follows in the footsteps of the P-47 in terms of resilience and effectiveness in ground combat. The P-47's innovation in the use of more durable materials and heavy weaponry. This is also reflected in today's engineering practices, where fighter jets need to be multifunctional, capable of operating in various types of missions, from air combat to ground attack. The design lessons learned from the P-47 helped create modern fighter jets more durable, damage-resistant, and with capabilities of carrying heavy weapons, remaining effective across a wide range of missions. Heritage in pilot training. Another key lesson from the P-47's legacy is the impact it had on pilot training during the war. Allied pilots learned to operate an aircraft that was resistant and able to absorb damage while offering powerful firepower. This influenced the training of aviators in the following decades, who began to be trained not only to perform evasive maneuvers, but also to operate aircraft that could withstand damage and continue the mission. This approach to resistance training, this is reflected in modern air forces, where the resilience of the pilot and the aircraft it remains a priority. The P-47 taught aviators that no matter how difficult the mission is, the important thing is keep fighting and strive for victory, regardless of the adversities. The idea that a pilot should be able to operate an aircraft even when it is hit or when it is in an adverse situation continues to be an important part of pilot training in air forces around the world. The persistence of a symbol. The P-47 in memories and popular culture. The P-47 also taught us a lesson about the importance of preserving historical legacy and how symbols of resistance, they can be used to inspire future generations. Although the P-47 was retired after the war, its legacy remains alive in monuments, museums, documentaries, and video games. The Thunderbolt continues to be a symbol of courage and determination, which transcends the battlefield, reminding us of the importance of historical memory and preserving the lessons learned during difficult times. The cultural impact of the P-47 is reflected not only in veterans' stories, but also in representations in films, documentaries, and literature, where his image continues to represent the values of persistence, sacrifice, and bravery for new generations. The P-47 remains a benchmark not only in terms of aviation, but also as a cultural icon that teaches about resistance value in times of conflict. Final reflections. The P-47 as a model of overcoming adversity. Ultimately, the P-47 Thunderbolt teaches us that, even in the face of the most extreme adversity, the persistence and resilience, these are qualities that can change the course of history. The P-47 wasn't the most agile fighter, but its physical strength and firepower, this made it one of the most formidable aircraft of World War II. Its history is a testament to the importance of continuing the fight, of overcoming one's own limits, and of innovating in times of need. As we look at the legacy of the P-47, we can learn lessons not only for aviation, but for life as a whole. The Thunderbolt is a reminder that sometimes true victory comes not from speed or agility, but from ability to resist, persevere, and achieve victory, even when everything seems to be against us. The legacy of the P-47 Thunderbolt, far from being a closed chapter, continues to inspire aviators, engineers, and aviation enthusiasts to this day. Since its retirement as a fighter plane in the 1940s, the Thunderbolt has transformed into an eternal symbol of resilience, innovation, and overcoming challenges, and its influence extends to different aspects of modern aviation. The future of military aviation, both in terms of technology, how much strategy, it still carries with it the lessons left by that legendary aircraft, the P-47, and its presence at future exhibitions. The P-47 continues to be one of the most displayed in museums and aviation exhibitions around the world. Not only is it one of the most sought-after attractions in aviation museums, but it is also National Museum of the United States Air Force, but it is also a central part of several traveling exhibitions, which continue to carry the story of this iconic machine to new generations of enthusiasts and historians. As the technologies of augmented reality and interactive simulations, as these aircraft become more common, the P-47 will likely be integrated into even more immersive experiences, allowing visitors to fly alongside this aircraft, participating in the same historic missions that marked the war. Furthermore, With the growing interest in interactive military history, it is possible that the P-47 will become part of educational experiences more in-depth. Where schools and universities so that they can use the aircraft as a teaching tool, promoting learning about military strategy, aviation, and the history of World War II. The fact that the P-47 is one of the most iconic aircraft of the war guarantees its constant presence in the world of education and historical preservation. The P-47 is an inspiration for new generations of aviators. The impact of the P-47 on pilot training and air combat tactics training is also reflected in continuous influence about modern aviators. Although current air forces use jet planes much faster and with advanced technologies, the concept of resilience and persistence that the P-47 exemplified is still an essential foundation in pilot training. Current aviators are taught to operate their aircraft with the same resistance mindset and willpower, which was essential for P-47 pilots during World War II. The approach of survival in combat and toned to adapt to adverse circumstances. The lessons learned from the P-47 are applicable to modern aircraft, such as the A-10 Thunderbolt II, whose design was heavily influenced by P-47's modern attack aircraft, which still serves as one of the main aircraft of close air support, continues to exemplify the principles of P-47 of strength, resilience, and ability to withstand enemy fire. P-47 and the future of military aviation, lessons that endure as technological advancements shape the future of aviation. The base of resistance that the P-47 established still has relevance contemporary. Military aviation is moving towards fifth-generation aircraft with capabilities stealth, and systems self-employed, but the idea of survive in combat, resist damage, and continue the mission, it remains a fundamental principle. Modern pilots and engineers still learn from what the P-47 represented in World War II, a balance between brute force and resistance, and to the ability to keep fighting even when adversity seems overwhelming. In the coming years, the transition to unmanned aircraft, drones, and autonomous fighter jets will not erase the legacy of the P-47. In fact, the concept of an aircraft resilient and multifunctional, which can continue to operate in hostile combat scenarios, will likely serve as inspiration for the new aircraft designs. Even with the change in warfare technologies, the idea of aircraft with high endurance and prolonged combat capability will continue to be an essential part of military strategy. Conclusion: the P-47 and its enduring legacy. The P-47 Thunderbolt is not just a piece of metal that fought on the battlefronts of World War II. It is a living legacy of resilience, innovation, and courage. The story of this aircraft continues to be told and celebrated through documentaries, films, museums, and model making, maintaining its spirit of persistence and overcoming always present. Every time a new aviator is trained, or when new generations explore the history of World War II, the P-47 Thunderbolt remains an example of like engineering, courage, and adaptability. They can transform the course of a conflict. As the P-47 continues to inspire so much aviation professionals, as well as the general public, he remains an eternal symbol of greatness of the human spirit and of the importance of persisting, regardless of adversity. The Thunderbolt is not just a part of history, it is a legacy that continues to influence future generations. Now, to conclude this video about the P-47 Thunderbolt, I invite you to continue following the channel if you enjoyed this analysis of military aviation. And since the P-47 still influences the world of aviation, be sure to subscribe and enable notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you are also interested in farms, ranches, and the history behind these incredible places, stay tuned, because in the next video we're going to explore the largest and most iconic ranches in the world, like the Anna Creek Station, the world's largest ranch, and much more. Don't miss it!